Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Stakeholder Integration Virtual Conference Session 3. So this is our last session of the day, and our topic is leveraging non-credit and credit partnerships. Today, our presenters are Albert Talley Jr., Abijah Cratchville, a.k.a. Abijah, Denise Hinojosa Arand, and they are all from San Jacinto College, and they're going to be talking about leveraging their non-credit and credit partnerships. And my name is Olga Escamilla, and I am your host. We also have Anne-Marie Molinari, Laura Greer, and Miriam Zavala here to assist as needed. So thank you all for being here. We have three presenters. Our first is Denise Hinojosa Arand. Denise is the Director of Adult Education Grants at San Jacinto College. She has over 20 years of experience in adult education. She's experienced instructor in dual language, bilingual ESL, and GED, or now HSC instruction. She's experienced as an administrator in correctional facility, Even Start, Family Literacy, EL Civics, and AAL-funded programs. She has experience in training and curriculum development for a large variety of programs, specializing in work with at-risk or underserved populations. So welcome, Denise. And our next presenter is Albert Talley Jr., and he is a department chair of the Child Development, Education, and Psychology at San Jacinto College. He's a doctoral candidate in higher education. He's experienced in evaluating degree plans and advising students and in team building. And he has 12 years experience as an assistant basketball coach at 3 different community colleges across the state of Texas. So welcome, Albert. And our last but not least is not Denise Hinojosa Arand, my apologies. It's Abijah Cratchville, and he's current Director of Education and Lifelong Learning for Continuing Education and Professional Development at San Jacinto College. He's experienced as a coordinator of student orientations and tours, and he's experienced as a coordinator and an assistant director of admissions and marketing experience. So welcome, Abijah, and my apologies for that.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. This is Denise, the real Denise, the first one on the first slide. Our presentation is on leveraging non-credit and credit partnerships. So this one is going to focus on education for IET. This presentation is about a collaboration that we had between non-credit and credit to try and build pathways for our adult education students and find stackable credentials and really build relationships internally and externally. For the agenda, we've got the welcome, and Dr. Escamilla already kind of did our introductions, which is good. We'll talk a little bit about pathways in general and why we were interested in, or why it's in the interest of, I think, students and programs to connect credit and non-credit programs. A little bit about how to get started, some of the challenges that happen, some of the successes, and also timelines, because I think sometimes when we're planning, there's a lot of things to consider when you want to determine how much time you need to be successful and what needs to be done when.
So this is Albert Talley. So I'm actually the department chair of Child Development, Education, and Psychology. Kind of have a few things lumped together. I've been at San Jacinto College for the last 8 years. I've been in community college for, 13 now. So I have some experience between building different pathways or degree plans with the athletes that I've dealt with in the past, so that we can find a way to get them graduated in 2 years, because it was always important. Student athletes only have 2 years of eligibility to move on until the next situation, so they have to have that 60 hours and get out so they can move on.
And this is Abijah Cratchville, a.k.a. Denise number 2. I'm the Director of Education and Lifelong Learning with CPD, which is the non-credit side of San Jacinto College. I always say I'm kind of the catch-all for anything that any of the other directors don't want to do for non-credit. I'm there to just kind of support directors like Denise who are over grants but can't put together programs. That's kind of where I come in. Almost 3 years now. Before that, I was with Galveston College for 3 years and the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, a specialty high school that's part of the University of Arkansas system for academically advanced juniors and seniors for 2 years before that. So I've pretty much been in education my entire career.
So as we're still looking at the who are we slide, I think this is a good representation of what we need for pathways. If you look at Albert, Albert kind of represents what would be the credit side at a college. Abijah represents continuing education, which can really develop things for the workforce that may not be on the credit side. And then I can represent adult education and how we all can fit together to try and build pathways for students. On the educational aid and how it came to be, I got that slide first because I don't know if we would have developed it if we hadn't had a need in adult education. So in adult education and literacy, we were looking for pathways. We were looking for integrated education and training programs for our students. And so to do that, we went back and looked at our workforce board, what were some areas of need, and then how we could build them. And that is actually how it started. So we're part of the Houston-Galveston Area Consortium, which is a workforce board that helps us with that and gives us lists of things that are acceptable. And also because we're big, all of the programs submitted pathways that they were working on and things that were approved so that we could look at it. And that's kind of how it started. It's something that I initially asked Abijah about just so that everybody knows it doesn't happen overnight. Probably a year before we actually started working on it, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would say right at a year before we started working on it. Because I came from student development, it took me about that long to kind of get my head wrapped around non-credit and really view through a cleared lens of how important non-credit is to the workforce, to our students, and the benefits that it can have.
So the next slide I'm going to take over here, why connect credit and non-credit together. So as I took over as Department Chair of Child Development, the educational aid had kind of been presented to me, and I knew that they were running it through some CPD courses that way. And I knew that I needed to meet with Abijah and kind of just get on the same page because I was a new guy in town, and I knew Abijah had worked with child development in the past. So we sat down to talk, kind of got bumped into Denise, and here we are. But the thing I realized very quickly is child development is a smaller department, smaller program as it is already. And as I was trying to figure out different ways to recruit, get more people involved in the child development certificates, I realized that I could get people in through the CPD side a lot quicker than what I could on an academic side. So, for instance, school started on a Monday. I had 2 or 3 people come in on Thursday or Friday, and they're wanting to get in classes, and I knew there was no way possible for me to even get them enrolled that quick on the academic side. And I was like, well, I know I can get them on CPD. Maybe down the road we can get them in. They'll start to enjoy what they're doing. They'll realize they want to move forward in this career field, and I can transfer those hours back into the academic side. So I really looked at it as a way to gain enrollment possibly, and to give students an opportunity to get into a field that they enjoy and get a job in the future that can improve their quality of life.
I want to add just a couple of things really quickly. At our college, continuing ed is called Continuing and Professional Development, which is CPD. And then one of the other things that I do think is important, just as an extra tip, is that, as Albert mentioned, he was new. And so sometimes when we want to do new things and when you're trying and you're reaching out to collaborate, one of the things that I do think worked in our favor as far as building this kind of a pathway was that Albert was new. And really Abijah was also relatively new, which made them more open, I think, to doing new things or something different.
And let me give you just a little more kind of information on San Jack and what Albert was talking about, because I used to do orientation and campus tours. So there's a checklist that students have to go through before they can register on the credit side. So they have to apply. We only accept Apply Texas. That has, I think, a 48-hour turnaround before it's uploaded into the system. Then they have to test. They have to attend new student orientation. They have to get a meningitis shot if they don't have that. High school transcripts, any transcripts from any institution that they've attended, all of these steps before they can actually register and attend credit classes. So that's kind of what he was talking about, the benefit of being able to use linked classes through CPD to get those students registered more quickly, because our CE app is a paper application that can be processed while they're standing there. So it really cuts down that time. So educational aid, why that? Again, I'm the Director of Education, so I can only oversee certain programs. Educational aid is a recognized certificate throughout the state, and that was the biggest reason that we chose that for my area. It's also a high need, high growth in our area. They're hiring educational aides every day, levels 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 different levels in the state, if you didn't know that, just for reference. And there's a very localized need for that with with PISD, Pasadena Independent School District, them needing to hire qualified individuals to work with their students. And it really is a pathway. As you'll see later on, we created a fundable, stackable credential, thanks to Albert and really him pushing his timeline. But it works really well for a student because they can, when they leave with an educational aid certificate, they're certified to work with students from kindergarten through 12th grade. So that's a wide age range. And then later on with CDA, take care of that Child Development Associate Certificate, they can work with students from birth through 12th grade. So it really expands their job opportunities. And then we had a relationship with Child Development already because we do link the CDA classes and some of those courses. So we worked collaboratively with them, which also helped with the buy-in because those instructors actually developed the curriculum, and then they knew the quality of what they were teaching because they were the creators of it.
On this one, this is my slide because what I'm going to say is it started out as an adult education and literacy need, or I was the one that initially asked for it. We had to go back. So these prerequisites are not necessarily the prerequisites that Abijah would have for his course or that Albert would have for his course either. These are prerequisites that we set in our adult education and literacy course, so I think they just really mean more to somebody in AEL. So for English language levels, we want them to be at least a level 5. We need them to have enough proficiency to be able to perform in English and to take the certification course in English. One of the other things, regardless of which IET they're entering in, is that it's really important to ensure that they have an actual interest in the course that they're taking. So we don't want them to just come in or just put them in because they want a certificate. We want it to be a good fit for them. If we do a TABE assessment or another academic assessment, we also want a 5 and up. You want somebody who's going to be able to make it. The certification courses are a little bit short, and that's kind of how I explain it to students. When I look at your levels, it may mean that you cannot enter right now, but this way they have an idea what level of English they would need or what academic level, and of course we go back and look at all the information because once they enter, we only have a certain amount of time for them to complete a course. So these are basically adult ed prerequisites as far as levels.
Okay, so this is Abijah again. I'll talk a little bit about our educational aid testing. We kind of, in CPD and in non-credit, we move a little faster than the credit side of being able to put programs together. And we were able to put this together pretty quickly in a couple months, I would say, from really starting the conversations with Child Development to them creating the curriculum, and we had students enroll. One of the greatest benefits, we have a lab school here on campus that is part of the Child Development program. This enabled our students to be able to get their observation hours, which were part of this course, in the lab school. There are some requirements that sometimes hold students up as far as background checks or having enough documentation for this specific background check. So we also have a relationship with the ISD and the Independent School District to where they can also observe over there. This first class was only 36 hours. It was 100% face-to-face, and 6 of those 36 hours were observation. And then their final is a parapro test, which I became a testing site for. And we worked that in so there weren't any additional cost to students. That's part, as the final, it's part of the course cost that I'm able to charge, which makes it easier for students as well. So I'll give a little more background on these beta results, but 5 out of the 6 students that actually attended the class tested, 3 out of the 5 scored at or above the cut score of 465. And just so you know, the Parapro scores range from 420 to 480. Parapro is an ETS exam, just again so you kind of know. It's part of the Praxis series, to give a little more background on that. And the reason we chose 465 was to correspond with the cut scores of the ISDs in our area. And some of the ISDs, depending on the score, the students could come in as an educational aid too. They have that ability to kind of make those changes, which gets the average range for that is about $13, $14 an hour for educational aid too. So it's not a bad wage that way. But just to let you know, not all of the students tested, partially because it took 6 months or so to become a testing site, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the challenges. But there's other things that kind of go into these results that we'll talk about a little later.
So Educational Aid 2.0, when we sat down with the faculty, I can remember the first meeting I had with them, and I was the new guy in there, and even my faculty didn't have a whole lot of familiarity with me. And I remember sitting down and telling them, all right, I know you guys have piloted this course with CPD in the past. We have to beef it up a little bit if we're going to make it an academic course and give it some legitimacy. So what we came up with is we went with the 96 total contact hours for the class. We included 48 hours of observation in it. And the one thing the faculty really felt was important was the observation for a student was going to be really important. Be able to walk into a classroom and be prepared to take on the challenge of working with students on a daily basis. Some of the conversations we've had with stakeholders in our area is they have people take educational aid just to the paraprofessional test, and they just let them go in the classroom. And so it was important for us to develop it this way so that anybody was prepared. It was important for that. We developed it as a hybrid course, meaning that it's half face-to-face and half online. That way we gave them that face-to-face connection that a student would need and give them the ability to do some of that work online as they prepared for that final exam to be able to enter ISD. The other thing is we've worked to partner with different independent school districts in our area. Where we're at on the central campus specifically, we serve Pasadena ISD, Deer Park ISD, and LaPorte ISD. If you look at our north campus, for instance, they also serve Green Park and a few others up that way. So we have a lot of school districts that we serve just based on our areas. The next thing I figured out was, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more in the next slide with the CDA, but I'm allowed to transfer at least 9 hours, or at maximum 9 hours of continuing professional development back to credit for prior learning. And if you can get people on that side, show them that they can get 9 hours of credit and that we're going to transfer it back into that associate's or certificate of technology later on, I feel that it gives them a starting point and gives them some encouragement that they can actually do college and maybe move forward. And then the big thing was building that paraprofessional exam in as their final. We really felt that if we could find a way to make that work, you weren't asking students to show back up or go to a testing site, and I know Abijah's going to expand on that later, but if we could do it that way, we had a better chance of success. Credit for prior learning. What credit for prior learning is, there's a few different ways that we can do it. We can do credit for prior learning with continuing professional development classes, specific classes that have been linked. And I know that Abijah and I have been working on linking just about every class in the child development area to give people that opportunity. And then our child development associate has already been approved for credit for prior certification through San Jacinto College. And it's a licensure. It's a worldwide or nationally, or it's not just nationally, it's recognized worldwide as a certificate so you can work with in early childhood. And the interesting thing with ours is when a student can transfers in that CDA, they obviously have to be enrolled here taking classes to get that credit, but they can get up to 12 hours of college credit towards a 60-hour AAS. So if you think about it that way, between a CDA, once we combine the whole program, if they take the CDA and they take that educational aid course, they're going to start out with 16 hours of college credit before they even really move into other classes.
So I claimed this slide because I was proud I found this research. So the benefits of connecting credit and non-credit. I like to try to find things to have arrows in my quiver. So when people are asking, why am I doing something, or why should we do something, that I can back it up with research. And so since San Jacinto College is an Achieving the Dream school, I found this 2018 ATD report that shows when 12% more CE students transfer credit when it's part of a pathway. Let's just use some numbers. If we have 1,000 people in continuing ed and those people are part of a pathway, we're going to get possibly 120 more students. I mean, that makes several classes. That's more than a lot of our programs may have in them. So it's those selling points that you can take to credit for them to be able to come on board. Albert was already on board, so I didn't have to sell this to him, but it's just good information to have. And it helps speed up the process. Between the three of us, we all have a different piece of this puzzle that got put together, which was unique. The more we talk to people about this, the more we find out how unique it actually is. And non-credit, we're not tied to the academic calendar, so we can start a class whenever we need to. We don't have to wait for a semester to begin at 8A, 8B, whatever, however many different subsections of a semester you might have. And this really is a bridge for students. And one thing that we've learned from this class in particular is that it's a prep for TSI. Something I didn't think about going into it is that the instructors have encouraged their students to go take the TSI test after they pass the parapro, so they already have that piece of, if they want to go to credit, behind them as well.
I just wanted to add on this one whenever we're talking about it. And we have a lot of collaborating partners, and when we talk to collaborating partners, I will say that for most of us, we have a goal of truly trying to transition students to college. So if I'm working with the ISDs, it's about getting people into the college. And so I think that that's the benefit of this collaboration, and I think we had to have people that were open enough to say, what piece can I do? What piece can you do? What are some of the differences in how can benefit a student? Because kind of as was already said, they may be able to get into a non-credit program a little bit faster on a different calendar with more support, but with the ultimate goal still being to truly transition them. And so we had to be able to see when we came together that it could benefit all of our programs. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. I know it was already included, but that's a big piece.
So the challenges to this were pretty interesting. Since I was the new guy, I really didn't have any clue what I was walking into. I probably jumped in a little bit deeper than what I expected. I remember having that first conversation with Abijah and Denise was telling me about that there was a need for this, and I just pretty much said, yeah, we'll do it. So with the first time I sat down with faculty and just said, hey, this is what we're trying to do. What do we have that's already built in certificate-wise, and how can we approach it? Well, in that same time frame, I didn't have any clue how fast curriculum was coming up. I didn't have any clue how quick Denise really needed her part done. I didn't have any clue how long it was going to take us to launch this whole thing. And I had no clue that I was going to have to try to convince everybody across the college to jump on board with this thing. And that, on top of it, I had to convince my own faculty to build the thing. So it was interesting. There were a few, I don't want to say they were sleepless nights, but there were some nights that I was trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. So it made things a little bit interesting. But at the same time, I'm always up for a challenge when it comes to that stuff. And I really believed that it was something that was going to be beneficial for students, whether they were on the credit or non-credit side. And I believe that it could really move people forward into improving their lives. So that was something that was important for me.
So one of the biggest challenges that we didn't know about when we jumped in was where students could test. I made the assumption that because it was an ETS exam, that there would be that our testing center would offer it or could offer it quickly. There would be other testing locations close to us. Little did I know that the closest one was Fort Bend ISD, which is not close at all. But I was willing to get bands or whatever we needed to do to get students there to test. Unfortunately, they only test 6 people a month. And unless you're applying for a job at Fort Bend ISD, you may not get one of those 6 spots. So I then was able to become a testing center. We have some laptops that were purchased through one of our other grants that I was able to get permission to use for this. But that brought on technical issues that you don't necessarily think about when you're hosting an online exam, and the software and hardware that your laptop has. So that's been an ongoing challenge, but it's something that we are addressing and actually have a plan of action for moving forward that we've been working with IT about.
The breaking down silos has actually been pretty interesting. So it'll kind of go with this next one with the CPD child development relationship testing. So when I actually took over, I kept hearing that there was issues with CPD on the CPD side as far as the relationship and the ability to work together. And I'm just like, all right, I just need to go sit down with everybody and introduce myself, find out what's going on. Realized pretty quick that it was just a whole lot of smoke being blown, and it was just something simple that we needed to correct, and we did. And since that point, I think our relationship's been awesome, and I think a lot of people are shocked that we're working with the adult education and CPD side, but I really think that's a direction we need to go with, since we have a lot of adult learners that come back. The departmental buy-in, it was interesting when we sat down with faculty and just said, look, how do you want to build this? I pretty much put it all on them, told them that they needed to come up with it. The only thing I did tell them was, here's my parameters. I want to make sure that it meets the minimum hours to become a fundable certificate through financial aid, and then it would give people enough training and give them the ability to enter the workforce with going into a multitude of areas. And they worked on that. The next was the college buy-in.
Do we want to talk about, you're not a standalone department on
one
campus?
That's what I was going with. Yeah. I'm not standalone. We have multiple campuses. We actually have a North campus, the Central and the South. There's a child development program at North, and we had to work through some barriers there. It was one of those things where me being the new guy wasn't really sure the protocol for everything, so we had to work through that. And there were some rocky moments. We didn't really know if this was going to move forward or not, but we kept plugging away, and thankfully Denise and Abijah stuck by me through all that. The building, curriculum development, and approval process, and what usually takes about a year, we found a way to pretty much get it done in about 2.5, 3 months. And it was a lot of time trying to put paperwork together, present data, and I was getting data from Denise and Abijah, who would help us with it, and getting that stuff done at a deadline. I think the actual first presentation date for curriculum was November the 29th, and it came back to us because of the college buy-in part, and then we finally had everything approved late February to actually put the certificate into the college catalog and move forward with that.
The only thing I want to add about challenges is that a lot of the challenges that we have here that we're talking about when building a pathway really are not challenges for adult education and literacy, meaning that when I come to the table, basically I need a pathway, and as long as it meets the criteria, I'm okay. So this was work that Abijah and that Albert had to do. Now, we tried to do it together, but as far as actually getting things to curriculum development, getting approval, doing those pieces, or becoming a testing center, those weren't things that we in adult education and literacy had to do, but you have to find the right people to do that with, or people that can work with you and that can help you in that area, is what I want to say, because I don't know if most of the people that are listening or that are interested are from adult ed or if they're from a different place, but this was work that your collaborating partner has to be willing to do, and so I just want to make sure that that's clear, and in meeting the deadlines, because just because I want a pathway doesn't mean it can happen, and especially within the deadlines that I have.
And I just want to say that one of the arrows in the quiver is having a subject matter expert like Denise, who can speak on all these different topics with years of experience and just a broad knowledge base to where no question can be thrown at you that can't be answered, and answered well with legitimate data. That was really kind of the thing that pushed us over the edge, with being able to win people over.
So success is we were able to develop relationships across different areas. For instance, like we talked about, adult education, CPD, and I think that that's actually kind of shifted into my faculty even. We have meetings that they're included in. I can remember when we first brought them in and they met everybody, they're kind of looking at me like, why are we meeting with these people? So I was like, just be patient. Things going to work out. We're going to move things forward and go from there. The other relationships we've worked on developing through Pasadena ISD, their ACE program, they've been they're going to be a huge partner for us moving forward, especially with educational aid stuff, because they're going to give us the ability to do internships or to work there in the ISD and get the training that they need.
And so another piece of this for as far as internal relationships go is coming from myself coming from student development. We had a little bit of a reorg after I came to CPD where my dean became the registrar, my former dean became the registrar who oversees testing. And so when I reached out to find out about becoming a testing site, I already had that relationship established to where he was like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like it's part of that grant. Go ahead and do it. You don't have to wait for the testing center to do anything. So that was a big success and a big win for our department. And then adding the certificate testing as being part of the final just closes that whole loop for the student. So if they want to get a passing grade, they have to take the Parapro exam, and then that will qualify them for the certificate. So it kind of removes any excuses for them not taking that certificate exam.
The fundable stackable credential was huge for me in the sense that, like we talked about, trying to find a way to give students the most training that they can get in the shortest amount of time where financially able to fund it. And I think it's either 15 or 16 hours is that magic number that you've got to get to. And what you'll see here later is we were able to come up with a 16-hour certificate that students can get done in a semester, and the way we built it into different time frames so that they can get all those hours met. But the great thing about this is, like I said earlier, it literally gives students that enroll in it the ability to work in early childhood, or if they don't like that, they can work in an independent school district. So it gives them that flexibility. We talk about marketability all the time, and that was something that I thought was really important for us. The advisory committee growth was another big thing for me. We have our child development advisory. Abaj and Denise are both a part of that group. And I really wanted to go out in the community as much as I could, and I challenged my faculty from day one to go out in the area and meet different child development, our daycares or child centers or lab schools, and start to develop some of those relationships, find out how we can work with them to make improvements in the different things that we can do. And we have seen growth. I think we actually had 30 people nearly show up to our last meeting. They're not all members. A lot of them are school stakeholders as well. But I think that's huge just to see the participation that we're starting to see. And even when we had our joint advisory committee with the North Campus in the spring, we still had a great turnout for that one as well. Increased opportunities for the non-credit matriculation. You know, we talked about the credit for prior certification and then the credit for prior learning with the Educational Aid Associate course. When we built the Educational Aid Associate course, I told them, all right, whenever we come up with this class and you guys are going to work on it, really want you to try to come up with, as Abijah said earlier, they had already developed the class, but we knew it was kind of close to some of the other student learning outcomes in one of our other courses, and then we kind of tweaked them a little bit so that when we did finalize those student learning outcomes, I could sub that class back in for one that goes into the Certificate of Technology into the AAS. And then, like I said, those 12 hours from the Child Development Associate also go back in. So it makes a huge difference when you're talking about a student starting out with 16 hours of college credit when they're trying to get a Certificate of Technology or an AAS later down the road. Institutional resources leverage. When Abijah started working to become a testing center, he got a hold of the laptops and the mobile charging cart, so I think that's made a huge difference. We actually gave our students that have been in classes so far the ability to test right there. As Abijah said, when you're trying to drive 45 minutes to an hour just to get to a site or convince a student to get there, you're probably not going to have great success with that. The standing institutional policy. So the person I replaced, she had already worked to have the credit for prior certification put into our paperwork so that it made it easier. You know, without her work, a person that came before me, a lot of this part wouldn't be possible. So we've tried to really make sure that we've taken advantage of that, and I think that we've done a good job with it. The relationships we've had, the internal and external relationships, being that I was in athletics probably helped me a little bit because I know a lot of people around campus. I've been here long enough too, and on the flip side of that, I pretty much walk in anybody's office, whether I know them or not, and just start talking. It's gotten me in a little trouble probably from time to time, but it's also helped me meet people like Denise and Abijah. So I think that makes a difference. The subject matter experts, I told the faculty from day one, look, this is your guys are going to develop this. I'm just here to steer you and make sure that we get this thing done. And to their credit, they hung in there. We had accreditation going on at the same time, and they didn't complain, at least to me, about it. They probably maybe said a few things behind my back, but they really dug into this thing, and they took pride in it. And I'm really happy with what they've done. I'm really happy with the strides they've made in the last 9 months since I've been with them, and I'm really excited where this certificate's going.
We didn't assign this slide to anybody, which was kind of the hesitation, but I'm going to go ahead and take it and just say, I think for some people, anytime you're doing something new, I think there's apprehension, and I think sometimes people are a little bit reluctant. And I think I get more disillusioned when I hear somebody and it makes it seem like it was really easy. I think no collaboration is completely easy, even when you get along. There's a lot of work involved, but it can happen. I think that Abijah came up with the title of Rome Wasn't Built in a Day. So these were some of the things I think are some of the tips, or how are we going to decide? And so I think educational aid is one of the stronger ones, or one of the bigger certifications that I'm pushing for this year, because I feel like we've done so much work for it. And to me, it's the most complete career pathway that truly has more options for the students and is a little bit better prepared. But how did we get to that? You've got to look and see what's beneficial, what's going to benefit the community, what would work in, for the students, and what's in demand. And then you've got to find partners that can help you with that. I don't think, even though to me I didn't have to do a lot of the work for the challenges, I still have to find somebody to work with. So you've got to have the conversations, reach out, figure out who can help you and who you can work with, and ensure that it's something that has something for everyone.
And so I want to speak on planting the seeds of a coalition. One of the best things I ever did since moving over to CPD was I hired our coordinator of orientation and campus tours at South Campus to teach student success for one of my other courses. But she has become the biggest cheerleader for CPD in student development and on the credit side in general, because she gets it. So even though she's not directly involved with this, because of her understanding what we were doing with this other grant, she was able to be a champion for us in this project as well, because she saw the benefits for students. She's actually recruited other people from student development to teach some of our other courses as well. So the more integrated the different parts of the college can become in your program, the more buy-in you'll have, and the more cheerleaders you'll have to champion your cause going forward. Another great thing, when it doesn't cost anybody anything, they're more likely to say yes. So that was the great thing about becoming a testing site, is it didn't cost us any money. Yeah, we already had the laptops that were purchased for us, and it actually can become a revenue source for CPD, because we get $10 for every test that we administer. So when you say it like that, you're more likely to get a yes.
Know your curriculum cycle. The interesting thing about ours, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of took ours and did it in a 3-month process, which it should have been done in a year. But I think the thing, and I don't even know if I've told Denise and Abijah this, but what happened with our whole situation actually opened a lot of eyes across the college and how the curriculum process works. And they've since decided to make some changes in the whole process to give a little bit more flexibility. But the old way, when we came in under that, we were actually supposed to have it done in November so that we could launch in fall of 2019. So when we really started pushing and figured out what that deadline was, I remember having the conversation with Denise, and she said, well, I really want this to start in the fall. And I just said, sure, we can get that done. And I was really thinking to myself, I don't know if this is possible or not, but I'm going to try really hard to make it happen. So, like I said, the faculty really jumped in on it, and we were able to make it happen. The on-ramps to completion, I'm going to give Abijah his credit for this slide because he actually did develop it. But what we really tried to do was to create on-ramps and off-ramps for students so that they could start out in one spot, get off if they needed to get a job, and they would still be able to jump back on and go towards their associate's degree later on, which was the furthest goal, or the furthest level of attainment we have with our stuff. So with what it is now, we have the educational aid occupational certificate. They can step off right there, which is 16 hours. They can step off right there and get a job and make more money. They can come back and get the certificate of technology, which will get them to 38 hours. which is Educational Aid Certificate of Technology. They can come back on and get the Child Development Certificate of Technology, which I think is 42. And then if they still want to come back to college and get that Associate of Applied Science, it obviously gets them to 60 hours. So everything that we did was streamlined, or it was, I don't want to say sequential, but it builds back in, it steps into the next one. It's building blocks. And we didn't want to give them any sort of classes that they would take that would not be usable later on. So that was our big goal with this. The other thing we talk about a lot is the credit and non-credit stuff. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's able to see this. So when Elijah and I have had a lot of conversations here recently, we've talked about what classes were and were not linked as far as the child development. And since then, I think we've linked everything. But
what does linked mean?
Linked classes means a credit and non-credit class are linked together. So we could have a faculty, one of my faculty teaching a credit class that has non-credit students enrolled in it. And the big thing for that is, like we talked about, if a student starts out and they're taking classes through CPD, they can go in and we can transfer those 9 hours of college credit back into that degree plan. And I think that's really important for any student to get credit for the work that they've done previously, because they're essentially taking a credit class on the non-credit side.
And I learned at one of our summits that when you transfer those credits in, if they are, that counts for their hours for ability to benefit as well if they don't have a high school diploma or equivalency. So just a little nugget there.
This is essentially our Educational Aid Occupational Certificate. You can see where we combine the main 4 classes in. There is an older version in there for student courses, but a student that would come in would, in theory, get an educational aid and the Child Development Associate, so that they have the option to work in early childhood or an independent school district. It's a 16-hour certificate, and the way we have it built, students can get it done in 1 semester for the academic or non-academic side. So it's a pretty short degree, and like we talked about earlier, financial aid does fund it on the academic side with the academic courses.
And I think that's kind of our last slide. We wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions, if there were any questions. And I want to say I see Tiffany Johnson's comment, and want to comment on that before anybody says anything, that you're correct. Adult ed is not always treated as a valuable commodity, and that's where I think this was valuable, and it has the most value for us right now, in that if we can do a good job with this one where we were given an opportunity to do so, it may open up other doors for us in the future.
Yeah, and let me just add to that. The one thing I realized, and I had the opportunity to speak with, or present with Denise and Abijah at the Taylor conference, and as I was sitting there listening to a few of the other presentations, we talk about community college all the time, but we have so many students that are adult learners, especially in child development. So we serve a lot of those as it is, and I think it's even more important for us to work together with adult ed for that reason.
And so just to respond to the question about having to be employed before they can apply for certification, that is correct. That's how the state is set up. But they also have to have passed the parapro exam with a qualifying score. So when they leave our class, they'll have a SANJAC certification showing that they completed this course. They'll also receive a certification from ETS showing what their score was. That way, when they apply for a job, they already have all of these things taken care of. And once they're employed, then the school district applies for that certification.
And another thing, too, we're working with our ACE partners. They've given us some opportunities to be involved in Pasadena ISD. We're working on some other things through some of our school districts to try to make sure that we're covered in that area. So it's always something that we're learning. There's always new things to learn, no matter what happens. We talk about successes and challenges all the time.
So I just wanted to read Brenda's comment. I think, Abijah, you answered this, though, just for the recording. So she says, we have been wanting to start a paraprofessionals course. When we researched the EdAid certification, we found that individuals must first be employed by a school district before being eligible to apply for an education aid certificate. Through your courses, are these exceptions to this?
Right, and I think Abijah did kind of answer that. We noticed that too, and that's why when we first looked at it. But I think that that's why it's important to make sure that you have a collaboration, like we said, with the school districts. And if we can get them started through our course, they've already taken the courses that are needed, meaning the AEL for the support and the workforce certification. They can take the exam, which is a recognized exam. They already know what the score is. And also, as Albert mentioned, we're working with the school districts, and especially in the departments within the school districts that actually need the paraprofessionals. So while they can't actually complete the certification, meaning they can't apply to have the certificate, if they already have the exam in place and they already have the training, it makes it much easier. The school district does have to do the piece as far as saying, yes, now they work for us.
And the great thing with
Right.
them doing their observation hours at the school district, it's kind of an internship to where they're already being tested or, on-the-job training to see that they're a good fit. And I know some of the instructors have talked about how excited principals and assistant principals are that we're partnering with them to offer this service to our community, and how much of a need they have. And this way they're ensured that they're getting quality applicants.
Yeah, absolutely. The comment was a great pipeline of future teaching jobs. I mean, it's one of the things there, because we realize that you're going to have students that come through that get this certificate and move on, and they're into that pipeline. And that's why I think that even though we serve multiple school districts where we're at here, specifically at Central, right now, it's something that I realize it's a work in progress all the time, but Pasadena ISD, for instance, is very much on board with trying to get people involved. And I really hope I think that's going to be the case with others as we start to move forward with this.
We have some comments.
Yeah, the
Henry?
bilingual. So it's interesting the bilingual thing came up, and I should have mentioned this because my faculty thought they would not be happy with me right now. But our Child Development Associate credential is actually a bilingual credential. I think we've talked about this before. Our student population at Central, I think, is close to 63% Hispanic. It's in the 60s, I know that. So we do have a higher bilingual group of students, and so that offering there has been really important, especially with the partnerships with adult education. We have some students that come in that have taken the CDA on the bilingual CDA that don't speak great English, and being able to get them that support they need has been tremendous for us.
And that also kind of offers a new pipeline that I wasn't thinking of for our programs, because there may be somebody that starts by going to the Child Development Associate who maybe doesn't have the English language yet for the certification, the Parapro in English, and taking that, but I know that they've already started building their skills and that they have an interest in that area. So it really is something that's beneficial to all of us.
Anne Marie says the partnership, collaboration, and hard work shows this should be shared nationally. I agree.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you, Dr. Escamilla.
Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate it. Adult education in a college is an ideal place because our students can transition into those, either a certificate or a college course. It's just ideal situation.
My mother was a public school teacher, and we talk quite a bit, and I say adult ed is college education now. That the non-traditional student is the traditional student, and I think colleges kind of need to get caught up with that idea that the normal college student is not 18 years old straight out of high school.
Yeah, and another thing we realized too, especially with this certificate, is people just want to improve their quality of life and take care of their family. And if you can give them short bursts of education to improve their lives or take that next step forward to make a little bit more money, then they're more willing to do it than to sit there when they walk in that door and see a 60-hour degree plan and say, all right, in 2 or 2.5 years, I might get this done.
Thank you again, everyone. This is great. I'm so glad y'all were able to share your wonderful, wonderful collaboration and partnerships that you have at the college. I mean, it's only a win-win when you have our students transitioning into the college and then continuing. Thank you again, Albert, Abijah, and Denise.